I never thought I'd get dared to sing karaoke in front of a packed bar, and definitely didn't expect that same night to end with me walking home in someone else's shoes. But that's exactly what happened, and honestly, it's the kind of evening I'm still trying to wrap my head around. So let me back up a little. I'm usually the guy who watches from the sidelines. Not because I don't like singing, I actually love it, but because I'm terrified of doing it in front of people. I'm more of a late-night car karaoke kind of guy, where the only audience is the dashboard and maybe my dog, who doesn't judge. That night, though, I was with my best friend Mike at this tiny dive bar downtown. We'd gone out just to grab a couple of drinks after a long week, nothing fancy, just decompressing. Mike's the kind of guy who's loud, a little reckless, and always pushing me out of my comfort zone. He's got this big, goofy grin that's hard to say no to. Anyway, we're sitting at the bar, and the place starts filling up with people who look like they're ready to party. Karaoke was about to start, and Mike's already eyeing the stage like it's a challenge. "Come on, man," Mike says, nudging me. "You're up next." "I dare you." I laugh it off, thinking he's joking. But then he leans in, a little too seriously, and says, "No backing out. If you don't do it, you owe me a favor. Big one." Now, I'm the kind of guy who hates feeling cornered, so that dare instantly lit a fire under me. I told him, fine. "What song?" Just then, this guy, let's call him Jamie, walks up next to us. Jamie's the kind of person who immediately stands out. Tall, lean, with this easy confidence and a smile that's a little mischievous but warm at the same time. He's got this casual look, like he's not trying too hard, but somehow manages to look perfect anyway. Jamie grins and says, "I'll make it easier. Pick your song and I'll sing the next one with you." I blinked. Did I mention I was already nervous? Now there was a stranger volunteering to sing with me? Yeah, that made things more complicated, and way more interesting. The bar lights shifted, and I could hear the first notes of karaoke starting. Drinks were in hands, and the crowd was ready. My heart was pounding like crazy, not just because of the dare or the public singing, but because I had no idea where this unexpected partnership was going to take me. And honestly, I didn't want to find out. I wanted to jump up, grab a drink, and disappear. But it was too late for that. I took a breath, picked my song, and stepped up to the mic with Jamie, right beside me. What happened next? Well, that's the part that still makes me smile and wonder how one night turned into something I never saw coming. The song I picked was "Let's Stay Together" by Al Green. Classic, smooth, and honestly not the easiest when you're shaking like a leaf behind the mic. Jamie gave me a quick nod, that same easy grin, and then the opening notes started playing. I could feel every eye in the room on us, and for a moment, my mouth went dry. But then Jamie started singing, his voice steady and warm, like he'd been doing this 100 times before. I'm not gonna lie, it was rough at first. My voice cracked on the first couple of lines, and I was painfully aware of how off-key I sounded. But Jamie didn't miss a beat. He kept singing, his confidence pulling me along. Before I knew it, I was finding the rhythm, and the nervousness turned into this strange kind of high. The crowd started cheering, some even clapping with the beat. I found myself grinning, really grinning, because I was doing it. And Jamie, he was right there, matching me note for note, making the whole thing feel less like a disaster and more like a shared moment. When we finished, the applause felt like a wave crashing over me. I glanced over, and Jamie's smile had softened into something a little more genuine, less playful. "See? Told you you had it in you," he said. Mike was whooping right behind me, proud as hell, but I couldn't focus on him. Jamie caught my eye and raised his eyebrows like, "Not bad, huh?" I laughed, shaking my head. "You made me do it. I'm blaming you." He shrugged, still smiling. "Worth it." We climbed down from the stage and headed back to the bar, where Mike was already waving a fresh round of drinks. I leaned over to Jamie. "So, what's your story? You come here often to rescue nervous karaoke singers?" Jamie chuckled. "Only when they look like they might chicken out." I'm Jamie, by the way. Chris. We shook hands, but it felt like more than that, like the start of something I wasn't ready to name yet. We talked for a bit. The usual small talk, barely scratching the surface of who we really were. He was new in town, working in graphic design, and really into live music. I mentioned I was into tech support, which made him laugh because apparently nerds like me have more fun than the rest of the world thinks. The thing was, the more we talked, the easier it got. The bar noise, the people, the pressure, all of it just faded into the background. We were in our own little bubble. At some point, the karaoke host called for another duet, and Jamie gave me a look, that same mischievous grin. Round two? Mike groaned from across the bar, but I was already nodding. This time, Jamie picked the song. It was Come On Eileen by Dexys Midnight Runners, a total throwback and way more high energy than the first one. We jumped up on the stage again, and this time I let loose, laughing as I sang, feeling Jamie's energy like a spark. By the end of the night, my voice was hoarse, my face was flushed, and I was genuinely happy. What started as a dare had turned into one of the most unexpected nights I'd had in a long time. As the bar started closing down, Jamie turned to me and said, "You want to grab some food? I know a great late-night taco spot." I hesitated for less than a second before saying yes. We walked out into the cool night, the city lights casting a soft glow. Talking to Jamie wasn't like talking to anyone else I'd met recently. It was easy, real, and strangely comforting. The kind of connection that sneaks up when you least expect it. The taco place was tiny but packed. And as we sat there sharing greasy food and stories about our worst dates, I realized I wasn't just enjoying Jamie's company. I was looking forward to it. Later, walking back to my apartment, I expected the night to end there. But Jamie stopped me at the corner and said, "Hey, I live just a few blocks from here. Want to come by for a nightcap?" I wasn't sure if it was the alcohol, the adrenaline, or just some mixture of both, but I found myself nodding. That's when he smiled, reached out, and took my hand. I never did get around to paying Mike back for that dare. Because somehow, daring me to sing karaoke led to Jamie taking me home that night. And honestly, I'm still trying to figure out how exactly that happened. But if you ask me, it was the best dare I ever got. Jamie's apartment was one of those places that felt immediately lived in, but not cluttered, you know? Warm lighting, some plants in the corner, and posters of vintage concerts on the walls. It wasn't flashy, but it was inviting. Exactly the kind of vibe that made me feel like I could just be myself without overthinking every little thing. We sat down on his couch with those small glasses of whiskey he'd poured, and for a minute, the silence between us wasn't awkward. It was quiet in a comfortable way, like this was exactly where we were supposed to be. I nervously toyed with the rim of my glass, wondering if I should say something profound or just let the moment breathe. Jamie caught my eye and just smiled, like he was saying, "It's okay, no pressure." So, I said, breaking the silence, "Do you always charm strangers into karaoke duets and then invite them back to your place?" I tried to sound casual, but I'm sure I came off as a little awkward. He laughed, that easy, genuine laugh again. "Only the ones who don't run away screaming after the first song." "I'm still surprised I'm not running," I admitted, shaking my head. "You're like some karaoke guardian angel or something." Jamie's eyes softened for a second. "Maybe. Or maybe I just like seeing people let go and have fun. Life's too short not to sing off-key once in a while." Something about that stuck with me, and I realized I'd been holding myself back more than I thought. Maybe it was the way Jamie made me feel seen without any pretense. Or maybe it was just the way the night had unraveled so unexpectedly. Whatever it was, I felt a little lighter. We talked for hours about music, movies, awkward first dates, and the kind of stuff you usually save for a third or fourth date. Jamie was easygoing but thoughtful, and I found myself opening up more than I had in a long time. When I shared some of my own insecurities, he didn't judge or change the subject. Instead, he listened, and that meant more than I expected. At one point, Jamie said, "You know, I've always thought karaoke was kind of like life. Messy, unpredictable, and sometimes totally embarrassing. But if you're brave enough to get up there and sing, even when you're scared, it's kind of beautiful." I stared at him because, damn, that was some deep shit coming from the guy who just dared me to sing in front of strangers. I laughed a little nervously. "You're full of surprises." "Maybe," he shrugged. "Or maybe I just like pushing people out of their comfort zones." There was a pause, and then Jamie reached over, his hand brushing against mine. The touch was light, but it sent a jolt through me, something electric and unexpected. My heart sped up, and for a moment, I couldn't decide if I should pull away or lean in closer. Instead, I just stayed still, letting that moment stretch between us. "I'm glad you stayed," Jamie said softly. "Me too," I whispered. The rest of the night blurred a little after that. We talked until we drifted closer on the couch, the kind of closeness that's more about comfort than anything rushed or forced. I felt the warmth of his breath, the steady rhythm of his pulse next to mine, and there was a quiet understanding hanging in the air, like we didn't need words to say what was happening. Eventually, I realized it was way past when I should have been heading home. But honestly, I wasn't ready to move. Jamie must have sensed it because he smiled and said, "You're not in a hurry, are you?" I shook my head. "Nope, not at all." We didn't talk about what might come next. There was no pressure, no big declarations or plans. Just two guys, sitting together, discovering something real in the middle of an ordinary night that started with a dare. By the time I finally got up to leave, the sun was just starting to peek over the horizon, casting a soft glow through the windows. Jamie walked me to the door, and as I slipped on my shoes, he slipped his hand into mine again. "Same time next week?" he asked, that grin playing on his lips. I smiled, feeling a little giddy. "Definitely." Walking down the street with Jamie's hand still warm in mine, I kept thinking back to the dare, the karaoke, and how a single night could flip your world upside down in the best way possible. I wasn't just singing anymore. I was starting to believe in something new. Something worth singing about. After that first night, things didn't magically turn into some perfect rom-com scenario. No, it was way messier and way more real than that. I was still the guy who overthought everything, and Jamie was still the guy who made me laugh when I felt like I was about to spiral. But somehow we found this rhythm, one that wasn't forced or rushed, just easy. We met up a few nights later, this time not at a bar or a karaoke stage, but at a little coffee shop that Jamie swore had the best espresso in the city. I was genuinely surprised how quickly I looked forward to these simple hangouts. No pressure, no high stakes, just two people figuring things out over cups of bitter coffee and bad puns. One evening, as we sat there sharing a pastry and watching the rain tap against the window, Jamie surprised me by pulling out a small notebook. "I write lyrics sometimes," he said, flipping it open to a page filled with scribbles and awkward rhymes. "You want to hear something?" I nodded, suddenly feeling honored and a little nervous. Hearing someone's words before they'd even decided to share them, that felt like stepping into a part of their world that was usually off limits. He cleared his throat and started reading softly. The words were raw, honest, and somehow hopeful. I realized that this guy who dared me to sing karaoke wasn't just confident and playful, he was vulnerable too. When he finished, I looked up, a little stunned. "That's really good, Jamie. You should do something with these." He shrugged, cheeks reddening a bit. "I don't know. Maybe. It's just something I do when I need to make sense of stuff." "That's exactly what art's supposed to do, isn't it?" I said, surprising myself with how earnest I sounded. He smiled, and for a second it felt like the whole rain-soaked cafe disappeared. It was just us, and those words that somehow made the world seem a little less scary. Over the next few weeks, our connection deepened in all the little ways that don't make for dramatic stories, but feel huge when you're living them. We'd text late into the night about dumb things, meet up for random walks through the park, and challenge each other to karaoke duets that became less about the dare and more about the fun. But there were moments too where I caught myself hesitating, wondering how much of this was real and how much was just the thrill of something new. I'd been burned before, and my guard wasn't the kind you just drop overnight. One night, after a particularly long conversation about what we wanted from life and love, I found myself blurting out, "I'm scared, of all this. Of us." Jamie looked at me, eyes steady but soft. "Me too, but maybe being scared means it's worth it." It wasn't a grand declaration or some sweeping promise. It was just honest and simple, and somehow that made it feel solid. The more time I spent with Jamie, the more I realized that this wasn't just some spontaneous night that got lucky. It was the start of something that felt like it could get messy, real, and maybe, just maybe, extraordinary. One Saturday afternoon, he invited me over to help him with some creative project he was working on, a mural for a local community center. I showed up expecting a casual hangout, but what I found was a spray-painted wall, a couple of brushes, and Jamie with paint smudges all over his hands and a mischievous grin. We spent hours painting side by side, teasing each other about who was the better artist, he totally was, and sharing stories about our childhoods. At one point, Jamie reached for my hand mid-brushstroke, steadying it as I tried to create a decent outline. I didn't pull away. In fact, I leaned into that touch. By the time we finished, the sun was dipping low, casting golden light over the vibrant colors we'd created. Jamie turned to me, his eyes reflecting that same warmth. "I'm really glad you're here." I smiled, feeling something inside me shift. Me too. It wasn't just about the mural, or the karaoke, or even the late-night talks. It was about finding someone who saw the messy, awkward parts of me and still wanted to be there. Looking back, I never would have guessed that a dare, a microphone, and a guy named Jamie could change my world so much. But here we were, two imperfect guys making a little more sense of life together. One song, one brushstroke, one moment at a time. After that mural day, things started to feel like they were unfolding naturally, like a story that didn't need forcing or overthinking. Jamie and I were still navigating the usual awkward territory, the unspoken questions, the quiet pauses, but it all felt less scary now, like we were both willing to step into the unknown together. One chilly Friday evening, Jamie invited me over to watch a movie at his place. Nothing fancy, just a lazy night in, which was exactly what I needed after a brutal week at work. I showed up with a bottle of wine and a nervous smile, half expecting to stumble over my words or say something dumb. Jamie greeted me with that same easy smile and a quick hug that somehow made me forget all of the usual worries. We settled on the couch with blankets and popcorn, and as the opening credits rolled, I realized how comfortable it was just sitting there next to him. His fingers found mine, fingers intertwining like they'd been made to fit together. At some point, during the quiet of the movie, Jamie turned to me and said softly, "I want you to know something." My heart did this stupid flip that made me think I'd probably lost all sense of cool by now. "What's that?" He glanced down at our hands before meeting my eyes again. "I don't do casual. With people. I mean, I've always been the guy who thought it was easier to keep things simple and not get too invested. But with you, it's different." I swallowed hard because I felt the same way but hadn't quite found the words. Heck, I was still figuring out what all this was. "Different how?" Jamie smiled, the kind that lit up his whole face. Like maybe I want something more than just fun nights and random hangouts. Like I want to see where this could go. There it was. The moment you either freeze or leap. I took a breath and squeezed his hand. "I want that too. I'm scared, but I want it." He leaned in, just a little, his forehead resting against mine. "Good, because I'm not going anywhere." That night felt like a turning point. Somehow, we'd moved from daring each other to karaoke duets, to creating art, to this raw honesty and the quiet thrill of being seen. Over the next few weeks, I found myself thinking about Jamie when I wasn't with him, replaying our talks, his laugh, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. I caught myself texting him at random times just to say something dumb or share a song that reminded me of him. One Sunday afternoon, Jamie invited me to a small gathering at his friend's apartment, a low-key thing with people from his design class. I was nervous because social situations with new people usually made me want to retreat into my shell. But Jamie had this way of making me feel like I belonged, even when I doubted it. At the party, Jamie introduced me around, weaving me into conversations, making sure I wasn't just the quiet guy in the corner. I even found myself laughing more than I did in a while. There was this moment when Jamie caught my eye across the room, and his smile was like an anchor, steady and reassuring. Later, when the party started winding down, Jamie pulled me aside. "Want to get some air?" We stepped out onto the balcony, the city skyline glowing behind us. The night air was cool, and I wrapped my arms around myself, feeling a little vulnerable. Jamie reached for my hand again. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said quietly. "I'm just glad you invited me." He pulled me closer, and for a second, the world felt still. Then he kissed me, a soft, unhurried kiss that said everything words couldn't. When we pulled apart, Jamie rested his forehead against mine. "I'm serious about this, Chris." "About us." I nodded, heart pounding. "Me too." But just as things felt like they were settling into something beautiful, life threw in a curveball I wasn't expecting. A week later, I got a call from my mom. Nothing about the tone was right, and my stomach dropped before she even spoke. Turns out my dad had been in an accident. Serious, but stable. Still, it meant I needed to head back home for a while, to help out and be there. I told Jamie that night, my voice tight as I explained. His expression went from supportive to worried, and I hated how much I was dragging him into my mess. "I'll be here," he said firmly. "You don't have to figure it all out alone." The next few days were a whirlwind. Packing, making arrangements, the whole emotional roller coaster of family stuff. Jamie and I tried to keep in touch as much as we could, but between my parents and the long drives, it got tough. There was one call, a few days into my trip, where Jamie's voice cracked when he said, "I miss you." I missed him too, more than I expected. It was like this new, fragile thing between us was suddenly stretched thin by distance and stress. But even then, beneath the worry and exhaustion, I felt something solid. Jamie wasn't just some fleeting part of my life. He was the person I wanted to come back to. I didn't know how long I'd be gone or what the future held, but I did know one thing. No dare, no karaoke challenge, no random night out could ever have prepared me for how much I needed Jamie in my life, or how much I was willing to fight to keep him there. Being back home was harder than I thought it would be. The familiar walls and streets that once felt comforting now felt heavy, with worry, with memories, and with this gnawing uncertainty about everything. My dad was stable, but the hospital visits, the constant waiting, and the way my mom's voice cracked when she thought I wasn't listening made me realize how fragile life could be. Through all of it, Jamie was my lifeline. Our calls became the thing I looked forward to most, even if they were just a few minutes between doctors, appointments, or late at night when exhaustion had me on the brink of falling asleep. He never pressed me for details I wasn't ready to share, but listened when I needed to vent, laugh, or just be silent with someone who cared. One night, after a particularly long day, I was sitting on the edge of my childhood bed, phone in hand, and Jamie's voice came through with that familiar warmth. "Hey, you." "Hey." I managed, though my voice was rough. "How are you holding up?" I shrugged, even though he couldn't see it. "Some days are better than others." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "You want to hear something ridiculous? I entered a karaoke contest at the bar." I laughed, despite myself. "You did not." "I totally did. And I sang Don't Stop Me Now by Queen." "Classic Jamie," I said, smiling. He went on, "I didn't win, but I was thinking, maybe when you get back, we do a karaoke night. Just us." "I'd like that," I said softly. It felt like a small promise amid all the chaos. A few days later, my dad was finally discharged. The whole family rallied to help, and I stayed longer than I planned, wanting to make sure everything was settled before heading back. But that stretched into a few more weeks, and I started to worry about how Jamie was holding up without me around. When I finally told Jamie I was coming back, his voice was bright, even though I could tell he'd missed me just as much. "Can't wait to see you." Back in the city, the air felt different, familiar but charged with anticipation. I met Jamie outside the bar where it all started, the place where a dare turned into something I never expected. He greeted me with a hug that was tight enough to say, "I missed you," but gentle enough to say, "I'm here." That night, we didn't rush into anything. We went for coffee, walked through the neighborhood, and talked about everything and nothing. It was like picking up a thread that had never really broken. A week later, Jamie invited me to another karaoke night. This time, I wasn't nervous. I was ready. We picked a duet, something ridiculous and fun. And when the first notes played, I felt that old adrenaline rush, but it was different. Jamie was beside me, and this time, I wasn't doing it for a dare. I was doing it because I wanted to. Because with him, even the scariest things felt possible. After the applause died down, Jamie pulled me close. "You okay?" I nodded, my smile wide. "Better than okay," he grinned. "Good, because I've got one more dare for you." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh yeah? What's that?" He leaned in, his voice low but steady. "Be my boyfriend." Officially, my heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, I wasn't sure if I was dreaming or standing at the edge of something real. "I was hoping you'd say that," I whispered. Jamie laughed softly. "So, you're saying yes?" "Yes," I said, without hesitation. That night, as we walked home hand in hand, I thought about how far we'd come, from a random dare to a duet to this. Life was messy and unpredictable, sure, but with Jamie, it felt like I'd found the song I wanted to sing forever. A few months later, sitting across from Jamie at our favorite little cafe, the one with the terrible coffee but the best atmosphere, I caught myself smiling without even realizing it. It wasn't a goofy, nervous smile or the kind you plaster on when you're trying to impress someone. It was the quiet, content kind that comes from knowing you're exactly where you're supposed to be. We'd settled into a rhythm that felt honest and comfortable. No grand gestures or sweeping declarations every day. Just a steady, real connection that grew with each late-night conversation, shared meal, and yes, occasional karaoke session where we didn't care how off-key we sounded anymore. Earlier that day, I'd met Mike for a drink, the same way we'd done before all this started. He gave me a once-over and grinned. "So, what was the favor you owed me again?" he teased. I laughed and shook my head. "I think I owe you more than a favor. You dared me to sing, and that night changed everything." Mike raised his glass. "To the best dare ever." I raised mine back, thinking about Jamie, the guy who challenged me, who saw past my walls, who made me believe that I could be brave not just on stage, but in life. Jamie reached over, sliding his hand across the table to cover mine. The warmth of his touch grounded me. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low and steady. "Better than okay," I replied. "Thanks for sticking around, for being patient." He smiled, that familiar, easy smile that still made my heart race. "I'm not going anywhere." And I believed him, because sometimes the best things happen when you take a chance, even if it starts with a dare and a mic in your hand. We weren't perfect, we weren't in some fairy tale, but what we had was real, messy, and utterly ours. And on that ordinary day, in that ordinary cafe, I realized I didn't want it any other way.